If this video found you today, it's not a coincidence. You're here because something inside you is ready to break. Maybe you've been feeling like you're suffocating in your own life, like every day is a struggle just to keep your head above water. Maybe you've been asking yourself why everything feels so hard, why you can't seem to find peace no matter what you achieve or change externally. Here's what Carl Jung understood that most people miss. When life becomes unbearable, when you feel like you can't take another step, when the pressure feels like it might crush you completely, you're not breaking down, you're breaking through. Jung discovered that real psychological transformation doesn't happen gradually through gentle self-improvement. It happens suddenly, violently, like a dam bursting after years of mounting pressure. The pain you're feeling right now, the confusion, the sense that everything is falling apart, this isn't the end of your story. According to Jung, this is exactly what happens right before your authentic self finally breaks free from the prison of who you thought you had to be. Your breakthrough doesn't start tomorrow, it starts now. Carl Jung called this phenomenon Enantiodromia, the principle that everything eventually turns into its opposite when taken to its extreme. When psychological pressure reaches its absolute limit, the psyche doesn't just collapse, it transforms. Jung observed that his patients often experienced their most profound breakthroughs not during periods of gradual improvement, but during their darkest moments when they felt they couldn't possibly continue. He understood that the human psyche has a built-in mechanism for renewal that activates only under extreme pressure. Just as a pearl forms from an oyster's response to irritation, psychological growth often emerges from psychological crisis. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but before you can become who you are, you must be willing to stop being who you're not. This stopping isn't gentle, it's catastrophic. The false self, the persona you've spent years perfecting to survive in the world, must die completely before your authentic self can be born. What you're experiencing right now isn't failure, it's labor pains. Your true self is trying to be born, and birth is never comfortable. Meet Sarah, a 27-year-old marketing manager whose life looks perfect from the outside, but feels like a prison from within. She has everything she thought she wanted: a successful career, a nice apartment, a social circle that envies her lifestyle. But for the past 6 months, Sarah has been waking up with a crushing weight on her chest, a sense of suffocation that no amount of achievement can relieve. She's been having panic attacks in bathroom stalls, crying in her car after work, feeling like she's living someone else's life but having no idea who she really is underneath all the performance. Last Tuesday, she sat in her office staring at her computer screen and realized she couldn't remember the last time she felt genuinely happy or excited about anything. It wasn't depression exactly, it was something deeper. A soul-level exhaustion from pretending to be someone she never wanted to be. Sarah doesn't know it yet, but she's standing at the exact moment Jung described as the threshold of transformation. The life she built so carefully is crumbling not because she failed, but because her authentic self is finally strong enough to break free from the constraints of her false identity. Sarah's crisis didn't happen overnight, it's been building for years as the gap between her authentic self and her performed self widened beyond sustainability. She chose marketing because it seemed stable and impressive, not because it aligned with her creative nature. She maintains friendships that drain her energy because they expect her to be the always positive, always achieving version of herself. She's been living what Jung called the provisional life, always preparing to live, always becoming someone else, never actually being herself. The psychological pressure has been mounting like water behind a dam. Every time she ignored her intuition, every time she said yes when she meant no, every time she performed happiness instead of feeling it, the pressure increased. Now her psyche has reached what Jung called the breaking point, the moment when the old structure can no longer contain the authentic self trying to emerge. The anxiety, the emptiness, the sense of suffocation, these aren't symptoms of mental illness. They're symptoms of psychological birth. Her unconscious mind is creating enough discomfort with her current life to force the breakthrough she's been avoiding. Jung identified the specific mechanism behind these breakthrough moments, what he called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create a bridge between conscious and unconscious contents. When life becomes unbearable, it's because your unconscious authentic self has grown strong enough to challenge the conscious persona you've been maintaining. This creates what Jung called a psychological complex, an autonomous system in the psyche that operates independently of your conscious will. Sarah's complex is demanding authenticity while her conscious mind clings to security and social approval. The resulting tension creates the symptoms she's experiencing: anxiety, emptiness, the sense that something fundamental is wrong. But Jung understood that this tension isn't pathological, it's creative. The psyche is using discomfort to force evolution, using crisis to break through stagnation. The unbearable nature of Sarah's current situation isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Her unconscious mind is making her current life so uncomfortable that she'll have no choice but to change, to grow, to become who she really is rather than who she thinks she should be. Sarah's breakthrough came during what should have been her greatest professional triumph. She had just landed the biggest client of her career, and her colleagues were celebrating her success. But as she sat in the celebration dinner, listening to praise for work that felt meaningless to her, something inside her snapped, not in a destructive way, but in a liberating way. For the first time in years, she felt the truth of her situation with crystal clarity. She was incredibly good at a job that was slowly killing her soul. The recognition wasn't fulfilling because it was recognizing a false version of herself. In that moment of absolute clarity, Sarah made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. She would stop performing and start being. Not gradually, not when the timing was better, not after she figured everything out, immediately. Jung called this the moment of Enantiodromia, when everything suddenly reverses into its opposite. Sarah's careful, controlled life suddenly became an experiment in authentic living. The breakthrough wasn't a gentle awakening. It was a psychological revolution that changed everything in an instant. I want you to pause here and feel into your own life right now. What aspects of your current existence feel unbearable? What parts of yourself have you been suppressing in order to fit into the life you think you should want? When you imagine living completely authentically, expressing your real thoughts, pursuing your actual interest, being honest about your needs, what comes up for you? Fear? Excitement? A mixture of both? Jung understood that the breakthrough moment feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. You can't see what's on the other side, but you know you can't stay where you are. Share in the comments below, without going into detail that might make you feel vulnerable. What area of your life feels like it's reaching a breaking point? Sometimes naming the pressure is the first step in allowing the breakthrough. Your honest reflection might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to know they're not alone in this process. Jung's approach to breakthrough wasn't about forcing change, but about creating space for natural transformation to occur. Sarah began working with a therapist who understood Jung's concepts of individuation and enantiodromia. Instead of trying to fix her anxiety or make her current life more bearable, they focused on what Jung called active imagination, allowing her unconscious authentic self to communicate through dreams, impulses, and creative expression. Sarah started painting again for the first time since college, not to be good at it, but to give her authentic self a voice. She began paying attention to what energized her versus what drained her, what felt true versus what felt performed. The healing process wasn't about gradual improvement. It was about permission for revolutionary change. Sarah learned that Jung, 6 months after her breakthrough moment, Sarah's life was unrecognizable, but in the best possible way. She had left her marketing job to pursue freelance graphic design, work that actually used her creative abilities and felt meaningful to her soul. Her income was less predictable, but her energy was renewable because she was finally using her authentic gifts. Some friendships had fallen away as she stopped maintaining relationships that required her to be inauthentic, but the connections that remained had deepened significantly. Most importantly, Sarah had developed what Jung called the relationship with the self. an internal connection to her own wisdom, needs, and values that no external circumstances could destabilize. The anxiety and emptiness that had driven her to the breaking point had transformed into excitement and curiosity about what was possible when she lived authentically. Sarah discovered that Jung was right. Breakthrough doesn't happen gradually. It happens suddenly, completely, and changes everything at once. The person she had been trying to fix was never broken. She was just living the wrong life magnificently. Sarah's story reflects Jung's observation that breakthrough moments are available to anyone willing to let their current life become uncomfortable enough to demand change. This pattern appears across all areas of human experience. The person who's been in an unfulfilling relationship suddenly finds the courage to leave or radically transform it. The artist who's been creating safe, marketable work suddenly abandons commercial success to pursue their authentic vision. The person who's been people-pleasing their entire life suddenly discovers they have needs and boundaries and the right to express them. Jung understood that these moments aren't random. They're the result of psychological pressure building until the dam bursts. The key insight is that the pressure isn't your enemy, it's your ally. It's your unconscious mind creating enough discomfort with inauthenticity to force you toward truth. Most people try to relieve the pressure through temporary fixes, changing jobs instead of careers, taking vacations instead of addressing lifestyle issues, medicating symptoms instead of transforming causes. But Jung knew that sustainable relief only comes through breakthrough, not through management of the pressure. The aftermath of breakthrough brings its own challenges that Jung called the integration phase. Sarah had to learn to live as her authentic self in a world that was used to her previous persona. Some people didn't understand her changes and interpreted her authenticity as selfishness or instability. She had to develop what Jung called the strength of uncertainty, the ability to move forward without knowing all the answers, to be authentic without having a complete map of where that authenticity would lead. The breakthrough wasn't a destination, it was the beginning of what Jung called the individuation process, the ongoing journey of becoming who you really are. Sarah still faces moments when the old patterns of performing and people-pleasing try to resurface, especially during times of stress or uncertainty. The difference now is that she recognizes these patterns as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. She's learned that breakthrough isn't a one-time event, but an ongoing choice to honor authenticity over security, truth over approval, growth over stagnation. If this video found you today, it's because you're standing at your own threshold moment. The pressure you're feeling, the sense that something has to change, the unbearable nature of continuing as you are, this isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. This is a sign that something is ready to be born through you. Jung understood that breakthrough moments don't wait for perfect timing or ideal circumstance. They happen when the authentic self becomes strong enough to demand expression regardless of what the conscious mind thinks is practical or safe. Your breakthrough doesn't require you to have all the answers or a detailed plan for what comes next. It only requires you to stop tolerating a life that doesn't fit who you really are. The pressure you're feeling is your unconscious mind's way of saying it's time, not tomorrow, not when conditions are better, not when you feel more prepared. Now, if you're ready to stop managing the pressure and start allowing the breakthrough, if you're ready to let your authentic self emerge regardless of how messy or uncertain that process might be, write in the comments, "My breakthrough starts now." Let's create a community of people who are choosing authenticity over security, growth over comfort, truth over performance. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring Jung's insights into the psychological breakthrough process, because your transformation isn't just changing your life, it's changing the world by adding your authentic self to it. The world doesn't need another person living a provisional life. The world needs you, the real you, living fully and authentically. Your breakthrough starts now.